This podcast is for informational purposes only. We are not medical professionals and do not provide medical advice. Consult a healthcare provider for any health concerns. Opinions expressed are not a substitute for professional medical guidance.
Welcome to the Optimize We podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay O'Neill, and I'm super excited to kick off this series of interviews and biohacking truths without the BS with you. Hello and welcome to the Optimize We podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay O'Neill, and today I am joined by one of my dear new friends, one of my favorite people, as I usually say, but Hayley is actually one of my truly favorite people, not only because we have gone through a very similar path in our lives and careers, but also because we are actively looking at what different biohacking tools, tricks, tips, lifestyle changes we can do for ourselves and for our children, for our clients, our friends, for our families. So welcome to the podcast, Hayley Foster.
I love that at this age in life, and I've got a couple of years on you, but at this age, you can find people that are like immediate friends. And I'm so grateful to have met you and to now be a part of your life and to have you as a part of mine. So,
Well, thank you for that. I feel this exact same way about you. And I feel like I've met a soul sister in you. And again, we've had like such an interesting past. We both worked in media, advertising. We were both successful entrepreneurs and executives throughout our career. And your pivot to this biohacking world, you're jumping in with both feet just happened last year. And it was a really scary event for you and for your daughter. So
our biohacking started a little bit before that. We were already doing a lot of the modalities in terms of turning it into more of my business, I would say. That started probably about a year ago.
when you were doing biohacking with your now husband Brian, who's awesome, and he's a former
Navy SEAL.
Navy SEAL, and they're intense people. So they don't do anything small. What were you doing? What were you guys actively doing in your household to optimize your health?
So the funny thing is, he got me into CrossFit years ago when we first started dating. And initially I was like scared of it. I was like, no, 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 that's your thing. I'm just going to do my little thing over here in my gym. You do you, and I'm going to do me. But within, a couple of months of us being together, he's like, I really want you to come. Like, it's such a great community. And so I jumped into the CrossFit world and started doing some intense exercise with him and this new community. And over the years, we kind of pushed a little too hard, broke ourselves. And so I think that really started us on our healing journey in
Right.
terms of, all right, how do we optimize this for the long term? Because there's no CrossFit gyms in the blue zones. And so we started, really thinking about the longevity of our bodies and our minds and our physical beings. And that sort of propelled us into looking at, well, I want to say it started off actually with Dave Asprey's book. I don't even know how I found it, but I somehow stumbled upon Superhuman, read that, and then very shortly thereafter, I started reading Peter Diamandis's book. The Future is Faster Than You Think, both phenomenal. And then I started listening to Peter, started listening to Jay Shetty, and I sort of dove into this world. And this was 2020 because we were in the middle of the pandemic. And I remember driving through the city going to probably like get our vaccination, regrettably so. And I remember listening to it on the way back. And I think that was really what propelled us
Right.
quickly into like, buying a lot of the things. I started looking at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference, which I'm excited to see you at in a couple of weeks. And then I never went, but we just started following all the people. Mark Hyman came into my sphere, and Andrew Huberman, and Dr. Robin Rose, and all of these, and Sarah Gottfried, all these people just started. The algorithm works, people, like on Instagram, you start talking about biohacking. And so we started doing cold plunges, There's a place that opened up near us called Boost, and we started going there for infrared sauna and cryo. And then they got a cold plunge. So we were doing contrast therapy and red light and hyperbaric and all the
Wow.
things, the PEMF mat, the compression sleeves, you name it, we were doing it.
You dove headfirst into
Head first, we
all of
got
it.
memberships. We were there multiple times a week, just
Wow.
making time for it.
Yeah.
His back was going in a bad direction. And so we were trying to do all the things to fix him
Yeah.
as
This is
best as we
your
could.
husband had a similar injury to my fiance, which is the L5S1,
Yeah, he's L4, L5.
L4, L5. I mean,
Yeah,
regardless of where it is in the lower lumbar,
it doesn't
it
feel
it's
good.
really, really painful.
Yeah.
So you're doing all of these things. You kind of got into it in the middle of the pandemic, like a lot of people did. A lot of people took a hard look at their health in the middle of the pandemic and said, I need to do something better than what I've been doing in my life.
Well, I started drinking clean wine during the pandemic too. So we were drinking and we were like, if we're going to drink, we might as well drink the good, clean stuff that doesn't have pesticides, doesn't have preservatives, no added sugar.
Right.
So that sort of started us on our clean drinking journey, which has now 2.5 years later turned into no drinking. So sobriety has been amazing for both of us. And I have to say, like, I feel like $1 million better. And then,
So going into what happened last year, you were already on the sober train. You were already on the biohacking train, pretty significantly on the biohacking train. You were like at the front of the train, trying everything, going multiple times per week to do all the things, the cold plunge, the red light, the hyperbaric. And then what happened?
so we were already signed up for Dave's biohacking conference, which was at the end of May. And on April 28th, we were away with two of our kids. It was spring break. Brian was swimming in a charity event. We didn't get a good night's sleep. We flew home the next day on April 29th. And when we got home, on the 28th, my daughter was standing at the freezer looking for ice cream and she was like, well, I was like, what was that? And she's like, I don't know, I can't get the words out. I was like, honey, you're exhausted. Don't watch One Tree Hill tonight. Just put your phone down and go to sleep. You need some rest. So Brian was leaving first thing in the morning to fly out to California for a business trip. My ex-husband and my other daughter were already in California, in San Diego, which is where Brian was flying to. And Jackson got up in the morning. All of her friends had planned this like fun beach day for like, one of the last few days of break. And she woke up and I was like, she texted me in the middle of the night saying, it's still happening. I'm scared. It feels weird. And she didn't wake me up. She didn't call me. She probably thought I would have been like, just get some rest. So I woke her up in the morning, or she was already up, and I was like, how are you feeling? And she's like, I'm okay. I was like, all right, are you sure you're okay? She's like, I'm fine. I'm gonna go to the beach. And I was like, okay. So she was definitely talking slower and she whatever she was doing, she was trying to convince me she was good enough to go. So I grabbed her a yogurt, grabbed her some water, and I dropped her off at a friend's house. And I was like, if you don't feel good, just text me or call me and I'll come get you. And I really wasn't thinking anything of it. And then I was on a call. I saw the text come in, and I could even, say to my person I was talking to, hold on. My phone rang, and it was her. And she was like, come get me. And I was like, okay, where are you? And she was trying to tell me where she was, and she couldn't. Like, she just couldn't get the words out. And I was like, all right, Jack. And I just, to the person on the phone, like, I gotta go. I just grabbed my water, I grabbed my phone, I grabbed my wallet, and I walked out the door. I kept her on the phone the whole time. And I'm like, where are your friends? And she's like, not here. I was like, you need to go back to them. She's like, I can't, mommy, I can't. I was like, okay. So I pulled up Life 360 and I was able to find her. She was at a local beach near here, and I kind of knew like there's not that many beaches near here. So thank God she wasn't far. And I think I blew every stop sign on the way to get her. I just kept her on the phone the whole time, just talking to her, being like, it's okay. Like, don't worry. I'll be there in like 3 minutes. And as I'm driving, which no one wants to hear this, I'm like texting Brian while I'm on the phone with Jack, while I'm on Life 360,
Oh my God.
texting him because he's on the plane now to California. He's only taken off like an hour and a half ago, and letting him know like something's up. I'm going to get Jack. She has a bad headache. She's feeling it in her right arm. And I'm taking her to St. Francis, which is our local heart hospital, which is right around the corner. And so I snatched her up. She got in the car. Her whole right side was trembling. And she was like, I need to go to the bathroom. I was like, you'll go to the bathroom. At first, I was like, let me text my friend who's on the way. And then I was like, you know what? Forget it. We're just going to go to the bathroom when we get there. Pulled into the emergency room. This is a heart hospital, thinking like, who knows what it could be. But if it's, she's slurring her words, she can't get her words out, like it's either heart, brain. So we get in, and within minutes, they're doing intake on her. She's looking at me doe-eyed, and I'm trying to hold her hand, sign the forms. Within minutes, they've got her, on a gurney, getting her changed and taking her blood, and then getting her into a CT. And basically, the guy sits me in the corner. He's like, just sit here. We'll let you know what's going on. So I sit down, I text Brian, and I was like, this is where we are. I'm not sure what's going on. And then with that, he comes out and he's like, she has a significant brain bleed. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like when he's like, we're giving her some contrast. We need to see like where it's coming from.
Mm.
A couple of minutes later, so it turns out she had this arterial venous malformation, which is called an AVM, which is basically they describe it like a rubber band ball of veins and arteries, but there's no capillary. So the blood just flows and flows and flows. And it's almost think of it like you keep going around in a circle in an exit ramp, right? And like
Right.
eventually, like your wheels are going to burn out because there's only so much rubber on the wheels to continue going in this circle. And so basically, she had a blowout, and one of the arteries burst and gave her an aneurysm in her left frontal lobe. So, I mean, fast forward like 3 hospitals later, they couldn't do anything for her there because she was a minor. Plus, they didn't have the equipment there. We had to take her to the children's hospital just to get her checked in to the pediatric hospital.
She was
Um,
14 at the time.
14.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that they can then take her to a different hospital to get the procedure done
Mhm.
along with the doctor. So, like, the entire neurosurgery team was there at the children's hospital by the time we got there. They basically gave her this series of questions, and then very quickly, and it's really all a blur. I actually do have a blog on my website about it. I can share that link with you if anyone wants to read the details of the day.
Yeah.
Basically, it turned out that they needed to figure out where the bleeding was and to stop the bleeding.
Right.
They said it was going to be, maybe a 45-minute procedure. An hour and a half later, it was complicated, meaning they like going in the glue to stop the bleeding. If the bleeding didn't stop, they would come out, go back in a different way to see if that's where the bleeding was. So after an hour and a half, the doctor came out and just said, we need to stop. We risk giving her a stroke at this point. So we're going to keep her intubated, send her back over to the children's hospital. The surgery team is waiting if we need them. And we're going to get there and give her another MRI and just see how her brain is doing. We got there. Her brain was not doing well. It had swelled and shifted, meaning there was so much pressure that they had to open her up to let the blood out, basically.
Wow.
So into surgery she went. And at this point, my husband, my ex-husband, and my daughter were back on another flight to New York.
Wow.
I think kind of just as probably some point mid this transaction, this whole
Right.
thing that was going on. And now, like, my stepson is with me, my nanny that we had for years is with me, and 2 of my really good friends, actually 3 friends, and my rabbi showed up. So they basically had to like take off this whole part of her skull in order to relieve the pressure. And then they take that skull and they actually put it into her abdomen to preserve it, which is
It's
the
really
safest
interesting.
place for it. Yeah. What was interesting was when she woke up and she's like, "What is this?" She couldn't really speak, but she's banging on it because
Yeah.
there's like a over it. And as she's asking, the doctor happened to walk in. He's like, "That's your skull cap," and she goes,
Oh my
"Yes."
God.
makes this face at him like, that's disgusting.
She didn't lose her teenage responses, at
She
least.
didn't
Mhm.
actually. So, I mean, she basically the whole within the hospital and I mean, it was a nightmare. We can record multiple details and multiple hours on it at some point. But fast forward, I mean, she was miraculously, she was like one of those patients. Her doctor was like, I can't believe I'm releasing this kid after a week. They
Right.
basically, a couple of days later, they were able to go back in, remove the AVM, whatever was left of it, and then put her skull cap back on. So it was 4 days later. And then 3 days after that, we were out of there.
Wow.
She was back at home and then in PT, OT, and speech um, for the next couple of weeks. And
So do you feel like she would have had a longer recovery or she would have stayed in the hospital longer if you hadn't started implementing some of these healthier strategies in your life and in your family? Or is it her
she
personality?
probably would have been in longer. So one
Yeah.
of the issues that I had, first of all, thank you for modern science, like and
Right.
technology that is out there that saved her life. Like if
Right.
it weren't for a lot of the things that they did, she would not be here without question.
Right.
So thank God for that. One of the things that I think gave me the support that I needed and the education I needed was all of the education that I've had over the years, right? So listen, when you need a pharmaceutical for certain things, great. But when I stood in that room and the doctor was like, well, we're giving her this, but then we have to give her this to counteract this. And then
Mm.
we have to give her this in order to counteract this. And finally, I was like, I'm done. Like with all of this craziness, like this poor kid. And it
Right.
was a nightmare. The entire 7 days that we were there, it was just, we slept there. We never came home.
Did you feel like you had to advocate for her all
Yes,
along the way? Okay.
100%
Yeah.
advocate for her. There were certain things that, they wanted her blood pressure to stay at a certain level because they didn't want, her brain to be flooded with high blood pressure. And so they were doing this one thing where she had the breathing issue at some point with her. And so they had this giant suction mask on her face that was really uncomfortable. And she was screaming to take it off. And it was also like hospital, I forget what it's called, but when they have like that panic in the hospital where they like go
Right.
crazy, she was
Right.
having that at night,
Right.
like in
Well,
like these,
there's like a medically induced psychosis, but then it's also, she had blood in her brain and swelling of the brain. And so, you never know how any sort of
right,
brain trauma is going to impact your emotional state,
right. Yeah,
right?
well,
They say
emotionally,
even people
she
with
was a mess.
cancer or, Alzheimer's, dementia, there's this confusion that happens because your body is essentially fighting itself.
Right. Yeah. And there was confusion, there was frustration. And so at one point I was like, you just gave her a test. It showed that there was some fluid buildup. Meanwhile, like this kid, she's tiny.
Right.
Her fingers like the size of sausages. Her legs were 3 times the size. She had so much fluid in her body. I'm like, you just laid her down in an MRI machine for 60 minutes. Of
Right.
course she has
What do you
fluid
expect?
floating around everywhere.
What do
So
you
they were
expect?
trying to like
Yeah.
open up her lungs. And I was like, just let her sit up for a few hours. So finally I was like, I'm done with this machine. Like you're gonna give her like another aneurysm. Leave her be. So it
You're going to
it
give
was
me an aneurysm having to
well,
watch
right,
a
yeah.
kid
Well,
go through all of this hell. So
there
I
was
want,
that too. And I do say that thank God I had a gratitude practice for the last 10 years because there were so many things I was grateful for. And there were so many ways that I found myself just like taking a quiet moment to find my calm, to find my peace.
Mm.
Writing is like very cathartic for me. And so like I found myself just sitting and writing and I was posting on Facebook every day for people that wanted to know what was going on. And that was my way of sharing and healing. And our community was devastated. So it was me being able to drop into the community from there and just fill them in on what was going on.
That's scary,
And
scary for her friends too, that probably witnessed it, or, I'm sure there's a level of guilt that everybody feels,
everybody, even
including
like,
you, including her, including Jackson.
yeah, the
So,
mom that I dropped her off at is like, I still think like, why didn't I notice it in the morning? Like, why didn't I see it? And her friends say the same thing. Like, what's crazy is there's one picture from that day and she is bent over like this. Like they're all laying out and they must have taken a selfie and she's just like this with her
Mhm.
head in her hands. And, her friends didn't realize either, and they felt terrible. There was a prayer circle on the Tuesday night before her second set of surgeries in town. And like, I don't know, like some ridiculous amount of people showed up, but it was like so many kids
That's
just like
beautiful.
crying in this circle. I mean, I could cry just thinking about their faces. I could just see them so vividly, but like crying in this circle, like so scared.
And fear, shame, guilt, those are all
Yeah.
really low vibration emotions that keep you kind of stuck in the right, keep you stuck in the fear, in the shame, in the blame of yourself. So I have a million questions for you, but I'll start with this one because I think it's, thinking about the blame and the shame and the emotional impact of going through something so traumatic for all of you. Your husband was on a plane going in the wrong direction. Your ex-husband was already on the other side of the country, with your other child. You're, here alone. And we always want to think, even though we have that like mother's intuition, you probably had that mother's intuition either that night or that morning that something was going on with her. But we always think that they're going to be okay, right? It's like our brain is meant to keep us safe, not to make us happy.
Yeah.
And so to keep us safe, it can kind of ignore some things and also hope for the best in a lot of ways. And I get this question a lot around biohacking and like all of these modalities, like all the stuff that you were doing beforehand. It sounds like the most important thing was your practice, because gratitude probably got you through the emotional side of it and is still getting you through the emotional side of it. It's also free.
Mhm.
You don't have to pay for red light therapy sessions or hyperbaric chamber sessions or any of that kind of stuff to share. But like how much of I think, okay, well, my daughter did the immortal chamber, and that was kind of like the tipping point for her. But it was an emotional shift for her. She went into the immortal chamber, and it wasn't probably the PEMF or the red light therapy or the molecular hydrogen that was in the immortal chamber. It was the guided meditation and breath work. She had like visions of her spirit animal that was a healer and not a sick kid. And so she made that mental shift from being the sick kid to being the healer, and then her symptoms went away,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So for you and your daughter, like what have you done emotionally to get to the place where you are now? Because I know you're still in it.
We're
You're
still
still
in it.
going through it. Yeah.
Yeah, she has another procedure actually. I don't even think I shared this with you, but they found more ABM.
You did. I
Yeah.
I didn't what you decided to do, if you're going to go ahead with the procedure or not, but
I
there's a
mean,
lot of
it's
praying
it's the
for you.
best. We met the doctor the other day, and he was lovely and very comforting, and it's the best option for her. She wants it out. The fear that she gets is that it's there,
Right.
and she wants it out sooner than later. Like we were talking yesterday about her doing it after camp, and she's like, I don't want to go to camp with it.
Right.
So
So
we'll end up doing
tell
it.
me tell me a little bit about this fear and your gratitude practice, and how important is that versus all the biohacking stuff that you can
I,
do?
I think the mindset is everything. If there's one thing so I had a spiritual life coach as a client for the last 2 years, and I thank God that she was in my life. Seriously. I mean, opened me up to just just believing in the universe and being able to see how a mindset shift or three deep breaths can change everything in your nervous system. She now is doing a lot of nervous system resets.
For
And I
you
met
and
with
your
her.
family?
Well, she does it for me. So I
Yeah.
meet with her. She does it for me. And she's amazing. We've actually went to this conference in California and we both saw the people that started this Cogno Movement. And they're interesting people. You should definitely check them out. And I said to her, Natalie, this is this calling. Like, you need to get certified in this because this is you impacting people on a whole other level.
Yeah.
And, had I not worked with her for the last 2 years, 2.5 years maybe, I would have probably been in a very different place mentally.
Mm.
My gratitude happened 10 years ago. I was going through my divorce, actually more than 10 years ago. It was before my divorce. Actually, it was during my divorce, and my rabbi had this small group program he was doing with moms, and he, pulled out a part of the Torah that talked about gratitude and how you should start and end each day with what you're grateful for, and it just sets the tone. So if
Right.
you go to bed thinking about what are the things that I'm grateful for that happened today, even if they're tiny little things, you go to bed and you wake up thinking positive. And
Right.
then when you practice that gratitude first thing when you open your eyes before you put your feet on the floor, what are 3 things I'm grateful for this morning? Your day just starts off on a completely different tangent.
Mm.
And I just had this conversation yesterday with someone who's really sick and she's not been feeling well for months. And I noticed her Instagram. And since October 7th, she has posted every single day about Israel. She has family there. It was very
Wow.
traumatic for her. And I was like, you have to stop doing this. I
Yeah.
know that it's important to you, but this could be what's making you sick. I
Yeah.
said, you are waking up, checking your phone. You have the sirens from Israel app on your phone that goes off in the middle of the night if there's bombs. You
Mm.
are going to bed at night looking at your phone and posting all this negativity. Like, you're in this cycle of negative and negative and negative. And listen, there's a lot of people that live like that. And
Right.
it causes you to just be in fight or flight all the time. And this is some of what I learned over the last few years doing my own hormone journey and perimenopause before I was in perimenopause and doing CGM to see what's going on with my blood sugar. And my doctor's nutritionist was like, you're in fight or flight all the
Right.
time.
All
She's
the
like,
time.
you need to calm the fuck down.
Well, also when you have high cortisol levels, and you're in perimenopause, what ends up happening is you're converting all of your testosterone and progesterone into estrogen, and
Yep.
then that can actually make you sick. The majority of women who end up getting cancer get an estrogen related cancer at some
Yeah.
point after or during menopause years.
Yeah.
And it's usually because of this conversion. And we also don't have the fluctuations that we normally would have during a cycle. We're not getting the toxins in our body, so we have toxic overload, we have all sorts of other stuff going on. But this all leads me back to, the conversation around mental health and your practice and your daughter's mental health and her fear. It's hard as a mother, and I can relate to this. You can't manage someone else's fear for them.
No.
You can give them the tools, right? Like you can practice. We do the same thing. We pray every night before the girls go to sleep, and they say the things that they're grateful for, and they pray for the people that they want to pray for. But Tony Robbins famously said, you feel what you focus on. So
Mm-hmm.
your friend who is getting sick by focusing on the awful things that happened on October 7th of 2023, for a year and a half now, she's been focused on that. I know so many people who are still focused on, the pandemic and all this negative stuff. And it's easy when you go through something traumatic to continue to focus on that. And what
Mm-hmm.
Tony always says is if you're a race car driver and you're driving around a turn at 200 miles per hour, do you look at the wall?
No.
No, because what happens if you look at the wall? You're afraid of hitting the wall, right? So your brain wants to look at the wall. But if you're looking at the wall, looking at the wall, looking at the wall, what's going to happen? You're going
You're
to hit
gonna
the
hit the
wall.
wall. Mm-hmm.
Right. So instead of looking at the thing, you have to retrain your brain to look at the bright side. Easiest way and the fastest way to do that is through a gratitude practice. So
Mm-hmm.
I commend you for that, and I'm also really grateful that you had that going into it. And then all the other stuff is interesting too. Like you and I had a conversation about the Leela quantum necklace. We're both wearing it today, and some people feel a tremendous impact by wearing this or by putting their hand or their food into the cube. I think that a big part of being is not just what you experience, what you believe.
Mhm.
So if you believe that this is going to have an impact on you, a positive impact on you, it's going to protect you from EMFs, it's going to give you energy, it's going to, lift up your mood and your spirits, then guess what? It probably is. So
Let's talk
how,
about that for a second because I think it's
yeah,
really important to take that to a deeper
yes,
level of discussion. So I used to say, like, believe it and it will happen, right? Like, fake it till you make it, right? Because what's happening is it's an energy shift. And I know that Tony Robbins talks about this too. When you believe that this is working, you are literally shifting your energy into a different realm, right? You are no longer in the I'm dysregulated, I'm this, I'm that. You're like, nope, I'm not, because your energy is now focused on what it wants to be, right? I don't want to be dysregulated. I want to be regulated. And I put this on because I was dysregulated. And
Mm,
do I believe it works? I actually do believe that it works. I mean, I was up and down all over the place emotionally and could not get my shit together. I couldn't find place. I was happy, I was sad, I was mad, all in like a matter of like seconds.
right.
And I felt it was off. I was cry on a dime. And then I
And
started wearing the
this is last year since,
within the last year. I
right,
spent years like finding my calm in my life, practicing so that I could be calm. And
right.
then when you have no control over it, and I literally had no control over it. It was like this plague like that I was walking around with. It felt fucking awful. And I
Yeah.
felt it was in my stomach all the time. And I'll get to the part because I think it's really important to share that too. But I walked around with it for a really long time. And we went to biohacking shortly after Jack got home from the hospital because we were like, we paid all this money. There's going to be all these brain doctors there. Like, let's just still go. She'll be fine. She'll be with her dad. Like, we cried on there. Like, it took a lot to get us to leave her. It was 3 weeks later.
Wow.
And then to be able to like be in it, right?
Right.
And I drained, I looked like shit, I was exhausted.
I'm sure
But
you,
it was worth
yeah.
the moment that we were there. I mean, it was unbelievable. We spoke to brain doctors, we spoke to Dave Asprey, we bought the products, we met so many incredible people. And I don't know how we didn't meet while we were
I was
there,
only
but
there for a day and a
I'm
half.
sure we crossed paths a million times.
Sure we did. Yeah.
Yes. But it was an immense for us and we learned so much being there. We met this guy Dakota, and I wanted to bring him up because he's really important in the healing journey. We met him. He was helping out at the Shilajit booth. And we went over, we started talking to him, and it was right next to the Leelas, actually, right? I can never say the name. Ananon,
And yeah.
Ananon, okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, he was right. So we were there. Then he was like, "You guys are awesome. You guys need to come on a bioculture retreat." Like we just started doing them. We're bringing in guests, and I'd love you guys to be part of one. So we were like, "All right, let's get your info. We'll set up a call and we'll talk to you about it." So we left biohacking. I didn't buy a Leela. They were out. And so I waited till I got home and then there was like a couple more incidents. I'm like, I need to thing. Like I need the healing to begin. And it was a process, the healing. So this was May. We scheduled ourselves to go on the bioculture retreat for November. And we had also signed up for another conference where we knew a lot of the people that we had just seen were going to be there. So between May and November, I was getting better, but I still was like I couldn't get the story like I just did. I'd be in tears, I'd be choked up, I'd like feel all the feelings and I can still see crystal clear, but the emotion that was connected to it has been disconnected. And, I was looking at EMDR doctors, like to try to do and that's very similar to the cognitive movement. So, uh, I was really hesitant about going on this retreat, and Brian and I would go for walks and talk about it. And, I said, like, I have a lot of fear. I have a lot of fear and just like going and like, I don't really know like what it's all about. And I know I'm going to be the oldest person there, which is fine, but it wasn't so fine for me. Like, I was feeling really insecure about it. And he's like, well, what would be your goal of going? And I'm like, I just need healing. Like, I need to release the trauma. He's like, then let's go with that as the intention. You're going to release the trauma. Nothing else matters. We get there, and, the first night we get into a Temescal ceremony, which is like a sweat lodge, a Mayan lodge. And it's about an hour where you are in this little sweat lodge with 15 other people, and there's hot rocks and it's hot as hell. It's like worse than any sauna you've been in. And there's a shaman who is leading the prayers. And every 20 minutes, he opens the door, he lets the air in, and then he starts another session. And I went in, you set your intention before, like they've cleansed with the smoke. And my intention was release. I just want to release the fear, release trauma, like all the things that are holding me back and keeping me stuck in this state that I'm in. And I wasn't as dysregulated from like I can now control emotions, but it was still, it was still there. It was lingering.
Right.
We were doing breath work every morning, meditating every morning, and there was a guy there, part of the retreat, named Tim. And Tim is a healer, and he does touch healing, 5 grams of touch, and it's like the lightest touch. And the second day, we were in a breath work session, and Brian and I have been doing breath work, a couple of times now. And every time I did it, I had like a crazy experience, like hallucinating, seeing visions.
Yeah, you can be into almost like plant medicine
And
trip.
that's what I get out of
Yeah.
it. Like it is that's my
Yeah.
medicine.
It's
Because it's
breath work.
releasing
Yeah.
all the things that the plant medicine releases. You just don't have to puke your guts up and
Right.
right for an hour beforehand. You just
So,
actually breathe and it works. And so,
so you're sitting in sweat lodge, you're doing all of the things, and
well, so we're in this breath work session 2 days
yeah,
later,
yeah.
and we're in a breath hold. And Tim comes over and just places his hand so lightly on my belly, and my whole body was like convulsing. Like my arms, my hands, my legs, my stomach, like my whole body convulsed.
The exorcism.
Yeah, it was the exorcism. He
Yeah.
literally pulled the trauma out of me.
Wow.
And I saw him later that day, and I had a one set up already with him. And he's like, what do you want to work on? I'm like, I really need to release the trauma. And he's like, what if I told you you already did?
Yeah.
And I
Sounds like
did.
it.
We did at another breath work session. And at the end, I went over and I was talking to two gentlemen, and one of them had said, we never really heard your story about your daughter. And I started to tell them, and I felt it. I felt the difference. Literally, I felt 100 pounds lighter telling the story. And I looked at them and they were like, are you okay? And I was like, yes. I'm like, this is the first time I have told this story and have not felt sick over it. And I was like, oh
Amazing.
my God. And then I told them about Tim and the session and all that. And that retreat literally transformed me back to feeling human again.
There are no mistakes. There's come into my life that we have, a similar story, like giving my TEDx a couple years ago. I actually stood on stage and for the first time was able to emotionally detach from my story. And I don't know if it was just because I knew I didn't want to cry in the middle of my TEDx or, sheer willpower, or if I'd actually let it go through all of the things that I have done, the breath work and the meditation and everything. But you're now transitioning this into not necessarily a business. This is your life's purpose. You've had the trauma, you did the work beforehand. You now have a strong foundation. You're able to tell your story to help other people heal in the way that you've been able to heal. You've gone through all of the different biohacking modalities, and I'd love to where to go to get details of your story, and then also to stay in touch with you because you're kind of in the middle of your story right now. And I feel like we need to schedule another podcast episode for like 6 months from now, that we can figure out how this story is not ending, but like what's the next chapter in the story for you. So how do people stay in touch with you and read the full story?
So the best place to stay in touch is fosteringlongevity.com. That is not where the story is, but you can get the story from there. But that is where you can sign up for our community, which is free right now, which is where we share a lot of the things that are working for us. And we started doing that on Instagram, way before this happened. And so on Fostering Longevity, on the contact page, you can actually download a 20-page guide on really how to get started on a longevity journey.
I
What
love
are
it.
some of the different tools you could be using? Who should you be following? Like we look at ourselves as sort of like the middleman, right? So, there's the people that are curious, and then there's the gurus and the experts and the products, and we look at ourselves as sort of like the funnel, right?
Yeah. You're like
So,
the
what do you,
guide. Get
yeah,
from point A to
yeah,
point B. And for everybody it's so different and may not have experienced something as traumatic like you have. But I think that the path is very much the same. It kind of
yeah.
starts with like, what's
It
your
has to start with mindset is what it
mindset?
has
Yeah,
to start with. And that's what the guide starts with. It's
that's
like
amazing.
you have a mindset. You have to be willing to remove toxicity from your life, stop
Mhm.
watching the news, stop hanging out with the people that bring you down,
Mm.
And I think it's also like an age thing. We get to I mean, I know I got to a point, and this was probably when I was 40 and getting divorced, and I was like, I'm done giving a fuck. I really am. And joke around all the time. Like I love the F-bomb, but I really like I'm a no fucks given kind of person.
Yeah.
Kind of always been like that. Like you know how I feel about you.
Mm.
Like I either really love you or not so much. And so I wear my sleeve, but I got to a point where I was like, I don't care anymore. Like I'm just who I am. Like this is me. You don't like it, then don't follow,
Yeah. Tough darts.
Yeah,
So
exactly. And so that's a
we've got
mindset shift. You have
fostering
to stop
longevity.
caring. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
So far, I know we have to,
Yeah.
we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
Fosteringlongevity.com.
Yep. I know, I love it
And you
too.
can get all
I'm
the
a
things there. And we're the next one is November, which is we're taking people on that retreat. We're going to
amazing.
immerse people in 5 days of living a longevity lifestyle, from food to meditation to mindset to breath work to cold plunging, temescal, ecstatic dance, relay races, hiking barefoot, being in nature, like all of the things for 5 straight days. And the best way to start a longevity journey is to just fully immerse yourself in it. And then we will teach them how to bring that back to the matrix.
I love it. I love out Hayley, read her story. We're going to have you back to
Thank
have
you.
more time with you to dive deeper into all things biohacking because as you have told us and as I've seen, so much there. I feel like we're still just scratching the surface, but you're an amazing guide. Go to fosteringlongevity.com so that you can download that guide. It's 22 pages long. Follow Hayley on one of her many Instagram accounts, but I think
Fostering
it's
longevity.
at Fostering Longevity,
Yeah.
the best one.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for more from Hayley on at wellness underscore and check out all that she has to offer and come see us. Like come see us. We're both in New York. So come
Yes.
hang out with us, reach us and join her retreat that's coming up in November.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for joining this week's episode of Optimize We. We loved having you along for the ride. Now, if you want to dive deeper into our guests' insights, be sure to follow them on their socials because trust us, it's worth it. And don't forget to connect with us either. We're at Wellness Eternal underscore. Stay updated, join the conversation, and be a part of the growing community. Until next time, stay inspired, stay optimizing, and we'll catch you in the next episode.